Yeah, I'm so happy to see everybody here. This is a really great, this is a big group, so everybody was able to join, and that warms my heart to see everybody. My name is Dr. Caroline Cárdenas. You guys can call me Dr. Caroline. You all know me as a San Diego Global Knowledge University counselor and advisor. I'm here to support people through their feelings, their emotions, not just the students, but faculty and staff. I also help to develop the seminars. And today we're going to be discussing workplace violence and how to collectively create safer environments. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. Thank you for enabling your video. Thank you for, changing your name so that I can see who everybody is. This is Violence in the Workplace, collectively creating safe working environments for all to thrive. Um, and so what are some of the objectives here? So let me just close. Okay, there we go. We're going to review workplace violence in the general industry, review the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, California Law and Prevention of Workplace Violence. We're going to define violence because we use that word a lot, but we don't necessarily know exactly what it means, right? And what it entails. We're going to review, we're going to define the workplace, define workplace violence, review examples of workplace violence, and then define safety. We're going to go a little bit over the autonomic nervous system because that's an important part of really understanding like why we get to a place of violence. Why do people get to a place of violence? And I think that if we understand the why, then we can understand how to prevent it and how to collectively, right, to bring ourselves forward in really creating more of a safe work culture. We're going to review tips on handling potential or actual violent incidents. We're going to review workplace violence protection plan, and we're going to reflect on kindness. And that part is important for me. Always, I always like moments of reflection. So let's see here. There we go. And so for now, I invite you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and arrive, right? And just notice. Um, Notice where you are in your mind, in your body. Notice how you're feeling physically, emotionally. And I invite you to listen to this poem that I'm going to read, and it's called Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans, and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. And so as we start to arrive back, so these are just some images of kindness. Um, it's nice to see kind of physically what that looks like. Kindness is the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. It's an act, right? So it's a verb, right? It's not a person, place, or thing. It's an action. Kindness is the quality of being gentle, caring, and helpful. It is the quality or state of being kind, treating people with kindness and respect. And I don't know about you, but when I express kindness and it's received by another, I feel wonderful. Here's another couple of images of kindness that we can see in our life, in our day to day. when we're walking to work or going to the grocery store, when we're in a place of our work environment or even at home. And so according to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, workplace violence affects nearly 2 million American workers annually. The California Senate bill addresses workplace violence by requiring employers to implement basic protections to protect employees while at work. And you can see in this image here, there's tension, there's conflict, and that, that's always something that can arise in our relationships. The California State Bill 553 was signed into law on September 30th, 2023, and amended Labor Code Section 6401.7, requiring employers to develop and implement a workplace violence prevention plan in accordance with newly codified Labor Code Section 6401.9, which sets out requirements for the plan. Workplace violence prevention in educational institutions. So beginning on July 1st, 2024, a workplace violence prevention plan for the majority of employers in California must be established, implemented, and maintained. And what employers must know. All employers, employees, places of employment, and employer-provided housing must comply with the new labor code requirements. So in our workplace, what is it? So the state of California, or California Gov Department of General Services, defines the workplace as anywhere a state employee is conducting authorized state business en route to and from, excluding normal commute, a location where state business is, will be, or has been conducted. And the definition of violence defined by the California Gov Department, the attempt or coupled with the ability or actual use of force or violence with the intent, and I repeat, intent to threaten, harass, intimidate, intentionally commit an injury to self or others, or damage or destroy property. And the intention aspect here is a key part, because having an intention could be a good intention or a bad intention, an intention that comes from a place of hurt, or an intention that comes from a place of feeling, balanced and joyful and positive. So the intention is an important piece there. So workplace violence is any behavior that raises concerns for the safety of another person, life, health, well-being, family, or property, whether direct or indirect. So forms of violence would include harassment, the creation of a hostile work environment through unwelcome words, actions, or physical contact, not resulting in physical harm. Verbal harassment may include disparaging or derogatory comments or slurs, unreasonable excessive criticism, or name calling. Intimidation, to make afraid, frighten, alarm, or scare, to force a person into or deter them from some action by inducing concerns for their safety by means of physical action or verbal comment. Stalking, any person willfully, maliciously, and repeatedly harassing another by any means, direct or indirect, that causes a reasonable person to fear his or her safety or for his immediate family. Threat. Oops. How do I go back? An action, verbal, written, or physical, which is intended to intimidate by expressing the intent to harm, hurt, take the life of another person, or damage or destroy property. This includes threats that are in jest, but which others could perceive as serious. And I think I just kind of want to pause here for a moment that, some of us or all of us may have experienced some form of harassment, intimidation, stalking, or threat in the workplace or out and about as we're trying to get from point A to point B to get our things done in our day-to-day lives. I have experienced as a nurse in the healthcare environment, I have experienced harassment, intimidations, and they were both subtle and overt. One example of that would be, a physician assistant, gave me a bottle of wine for going the extra mile, let's say, for a patient, right? And a envious nurse in the break room said, "Oh, I wonder what you're doing to receive a wine bottle from that person." So there was sort of this sort of verbal kind of ingest, almost a bullying, a hierarchical power dynamic, and insinuating behind that some sort of other thing that's going on beyond a kindness, a gesture of kindness. And that's a type of form of harassment and intimidation. Examples of workplace violence would be hitting, shoving, blocking of an individual, shouting, yelling, or verbal harassment directly or indirectly, threatening an individual or his or her family or associates, or property with harm, the intentional destruction or threat of destruction of property, harassing, surveillance, or stalking, the suggestion or intimidation that violence is appropriate, unauthorized possession or inappropriate use of firearms or weapons, and threatening or attempting self-injury or suicide. And also, really kind of making emphasis here that like we are living in a time right now, and this is a reality, and it's a very unfortunate reality, that we have gun violence in educational institutions. And this is unfortunately a norm that we have been living in for years, that now children in schools are doing these, these actual, I forget what you call them, but basically like protecting themselves from a potential harmful person on campus. These are realities, and we need to be aware of them and know how to safely engage in the world when we notice that somebody might be violent. So defining safety and the goal of safety in the workplace. So safety is the condition of being safe, freedom from hurt, injury, or loss. It's the state of being safe, protected of harm or danger. And I want you to think about the physical safety, your psychological safety, social safety, and spiritual safety. It's not just our physical safety that we have to think about. And safety goal, the main goal of safety and health programs is to prevent workplace injuries, illness, and deaths, as well as suffering and financial hardship. And these events can cause the workers, their families, and employers. So tips on how to handle a potential or actual violent incident. We need to know the warning signs. So there's research into incident of workplace violence that shows the presence of at least several of the following characteristics in a potentially violent individual. And clearly not everyone who exhibits one or more of these warning signs is potentially violent, but understanding these signs, recognizing them when they occur, and acting on that knowledge and recognition are vital steps in heading off the possibility of tragedy. So hints to handle this, right? The actual potential incidents of violence. So knowing the warning signs, making direct or indirect threats. Don't you do that or I'm going to. That's a threat. Intimidating, belligerent, harassing, bullying, or other inappropriate or aggressive behavior. Statements showing fascination with incidents of workplace violence, statements indicating approval of the use of violence to resolve a problem, or statements indicating identification with perpetrators or workplace homicides. Statements indicating desperation over family, financial, or other personal problems to the point of suicide, extreme changes in behavior, numerous conflict with supervisors and other employees, and then bringing a weapon to the workplace, brandishing a weapon in the workplace, making inappropriate references to guns or fascinations with weapons. I graduated high school, let's see, in 1997, and there was a friend, a person in the circle of friends that thought it was cool to bring a gun to school in his backpack. This was 25 years ago, and that person got in trouble, right? But these are things that happen. Being proactive. So managers, supervisors, really all of us are accountable for recognizing a potential threat and the possible situation of violence. And before a potential actual violent incident occurs, managers and supervisors need to foster a supportive, harmonious work environment. We need to foster mutual respect to reduce harassment and hostility in the workplace. So it's really about how we develop our workplace culture. We need to communicate openly and give employees support and recognition. Train managers and supervisors and employees on how to resolve conflicts and develop skills in effective communication, team building, and resolving dispute. So other ways to, to handle is to remain calm and speak to the person quietly and calmly. If you notice that they're, in the red zone and they're heated and they're out of their center and they're dysregulated and they're really angry. We want to try to put some space between yourself and the other person. If you notice that they've got, that rage affect in their face, they're clenching their jaw and their fists, you want to create some space because in those moments, people can be very reactive. If you feel like there might be a potential, a possible harm, you want to call 911 if there's immediate danger or someone is for someone to be injured. Or supervisor when it's safe to do so. Hints to handle potential potential actual violent incidents. We don't want to escalate the situation. We want to try to not shout at the other person. We want to bring our voice low. We want to give ourselves space. We want to look at them. We want to acknowledge them. We don't want to argue with them. We certainly don't want to become defensive or bring out any sprays or weapons, fight with the other person, chase the other person, try to break up or intervene in a violent act, because we also don't want anybody to get hurt in the process. So developing a workplace prevention plan is really important by, thereby prohibiting employee retaliation, accepting and responding to reports of workplace violence, employee workplace violence training and communication, emergency response, workplace violence hazardous assessment, and then other requirements such as maintaining a violent incident log. And, the labor code section 6401.9 outlines the elements of a workplace violence prevention plan. And every covered employer is required to establish, implement, and maintain an effective workplace violence prevention plan, which includes the following: the names of the person responsible for its implementation, effective procedures for employee involvement in developing and implementing the plan, methods to coordinate implementation of the plan with other employers when applicable, procedures for employers to handle and respond to reports of workplace violence while ensuring no retaliation against the reporting employee, procedures to ensure compliance from employees, including supervisors, procedures to communicate with employees regarding workplace violence matters, emergency response protocols, training provisions, procedures to identify and evaluate workplace violence hazards that include inspections with the following frequency: when the plan is first in step or set up, periodically scheduled, after violent incidents, and whenever a new hazard becomes known, or risks, right? When we notice that there might be a risk. Procedures to timely correct workplace violence hazard identified and evaluated, procedures for post-incident response and investigation, procedures that allow for a plan to review annually when a deficiency is observed and becomes apparent after workplace violence incidents, and any other procedures necessary for employee health and safety as required by the division and standard boards. Any other procedures necessary for employee health and safety as required by divisions and standard board. The plan must be in effect at all times and in all work areas and be specific to the hazards and corrective measures for each work area and operation. The written plan may be incorporated as a standalone section in the written injury and illness prevention program required by the section 3203 of Title 8 of the California Code of Regulations, or maintained as a separate document. Employers must maintain a log of all incidents of workplace violence, even if the incident did not result in injury. This log must include information on every workplace violence incident based on employee statements, witnesses' statements, and investigation findings. Incidents information must include at least the following: the date, the time, and the location that the incident occurred, workplace violence type, and we can find that type by 1, 2, or 3, or 4 levels on the California.gov Workplace Violence Prevention Plan. Classifications of who committed the violence, the circumstance at the time of the incident, and where the incident occurred. So this is like the who, what, when, why, what occurred, right? Specific incident characteristics such as physical attacks, weapons involvement, threats, sexual assault, animal incidents, or other events. what the consequences of the incident were, including any involvement of law enforcement, what steps were taken to protect employees from further threats or hazards, and who completed the log, including their name, job title, and the date completed. And we want to make sure that employers must exclude personal identifying information that would identify any person involved in a violent incident. So training employees must provide effective training and ensure that training materials are easy to understand and match the workers' education, reading skills, and language. Employers must provide employees with initial training and annual thereafter. The training is required to cover various aspects, including the following: familiarizing employees with the plan, how to obtain a copy, and how to participate in the development and implementation of the employer's plan. Definition and requirements of the Labor Code Section 6401.9. How to report workplace violence incidents without fear of retaliation. Understanding of job-specific violence hazards and prevention measures. Purpose of the violent incident log and how to obtain related records. Opportunities for interactive discussions with someone knowledgeable about the employer's plan. When new or previously unidentified workplace violence hazards are discovered or changes are made to the plan, the employer must provide the additional training that focuses on the specific hazard or plan modifications. So employers' responsibilities with workplace violence record keeping requires the plan must be in writing and easily accessible to employees, authorized by employee representation and Cal OSHA representatives. Record of workplace violence hazard identification, evaluation, and correction must be created and maintained for the minimum of 5 years. Training records must be created and maintained for a minimum of 1 year. Violent incident logs must be maintained for a minimum of 5 years. And I'm repeating myself there. I must have been tired at that moment. Additional information and resources. And so, as required by Title 8, Section 34(2)A, reporting work-connected fatalities and serious injuries, employers have a legal responsibility to immediately report to the California OSHA any serious injury or illnesses or death, including any due to workplace violence and of employee occurring in a place of employment or in connection with employment. Additional regulations that may apply to workplace violence and exposure can be found in the following Title Section 8. For instructions on reporting, go to report work-related accidents employees. So all of this information we can find on the california.gov, workplace violence and prevention, and how to log that. And this is just an example of of the forms and what we can find there in terms of how to guide us through that. And then I also put the hyperlink here. And so how do we collectively create safer work environments? So this is kind of where I bring a little bit more of my I would say my educational training around why is this important, right? We just went through the legality part of that, which is really sort of dry and okay, this is all the stuff that we need to know. But from a psychological standpoint, I'm just kind of reminding us Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the beginning, at the bottom of everything, we all need to be able to have food, water, shelter, clothing, and sleep. And then in the next tier is safety and security, health, employment, property, family, and social stability. Then love and belonging, right? Friendships, family, intimacy, sense of connection, self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect for others, the need to be a unique individual. And then we get to the tippy top, which is self-actualization, where we have morality, creativity, meaning, purpose, and inner potential. So we can't really talk about violence or workplace violence without really talking about mental health. And really, mental health is always sort of kind of at the tippy top of everything, right? Because without our mental health, it's really hard to function. So according to the CDC, and prevention mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps to determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from birth to death, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And I encourage you to think about mental health about being a lot more than just mental, as this word overly focused is on cognition. Instead of mental health, we could say moving towards wholeness, right? And I always kind of default to everybody's going through something. We don't know what they're potentially going through, right? Sometimes we, have armor in front of it, or we mask it because we don't want to bring that in our professional roles, but we're all sort of kind of grappling through something. Sometimes moments are harder than others. So why is mental health important? We've got the emotional, the physical, the psychological, the social, and right in the middle, we've got the well-being. And mental and physical health are equally important components of our overall health. We have acute and chronic conditions of any of these components of our human experience that can affect our mental health and sense of overall well-being and wholeness. And mental health, who does it affect? It affects everyone. So it's not just staff and faculty at SDGKU, but it also affects our students. And I think we see that more and more as we learn about our students, find out who they are, and understand some of the things that they might be grappling with. And this is a really key important factor here, is research suggests that most human brains take about 25 to 30 years to develop. And though these rates can vary among men and women and among individuals, so we have to remember that even though we're legally can drink alcohol at the age of, 21, and that we're legally an adult at 18, our brains are still developing. For males, it can even take up to 30 years. Let's look at the three-part brain, which this part is really important. So we've got the lower part of the brain, which is the brain stem, the cerebellum. We call that the lizard brain. Then we've got the limbic system, which is the middle part of the brain. That's the mammal brain, or the mammalian brain, which is the emotions, memories, habits, and attachments. And then we have the the prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning, the human brain, the neocortex, which is language, abstract thought, imagination, consciousness, reasoning, and rationalizing. When children grow up in traumatic households and experience enormous amount of trauma through childhood, adolescence, they tend to have a lower part of their brain that's much more developed than their middle part of their brain and their executive functioning part of their brain. That's why it's so important for all of us to try and contribute to keeping children safe and safe from harm from trauma, because if we see here that the lower part of the brain is fight, flight, or freeze state, it's more developed in people that have experienced childhood trauma. And so we want to be able to nurture children to have executive functioning. And that doesn't just take the parents, it takes the community, to be able to keep children safe so that they can have fully developed brains, so that they can have responsiveness rather than reactiveness. Why? Because reactiveness can be very destructive. And let's look at the qualities of reactivity versus responsiveness. Responsiveness is designed to increase comfort in a very short term. A reaction seeks to soothe discomfort without involving intellect. That's the reptilian part of the brain, the lower part of the brain. It's quick in nature, it's designed for our survival, and it has the potential to be destructive. Responsiveness is slow in nature. It is not rushed. It's wise, it's intelligent, it's thoughtful, it's productive. It considers the ultimate outcome from a course of action. It lacks aggressiveness and targets the best outcome. It's constructive and solution-oriented, seeking to improve the situation, and it engages reflexive capability. And the last piece to that is it involves our imagination. So that we can imagine that when we experience negative stimuli coming at us, that we can imagine an infinite amount of possibilities to respond to that situation. If we're not using our imagination, then we are apt to be more reactive when we experience negative stimuli. And that reactivity could have potential for destructiveness. Reactivity is really designed for survival. Stress versus distress. We live in a culture that, I hate to say it, but the toxic stress is alive and well. Stress is how our body responds to pressures or tensions. Stress can be caused by feelings of unease, anxiety, frustration, nervousness, fearfulness, or helplessness. When stressed, one could experience changes in sleep, appetite, energy, or energy level. And feeling stress is normal, especially when experiencing life changes. But distress is an aversion. It's a negative state in which coping and adaptation process fail to return to individual to a sort of homeostasis or balance. where we sort of remain in this heightened level of stress. And it's severe or prolonged stressors or multiple cumulative stressors, insults with has deleterious effects on a person's welfare and can progress to maladaptive states. So, I'm always about affect, feelings, and emotions, and it's really important that we understand its differences. Affects is biology, feelings are psychology, and emotions are biography. Affects are innate biological responses to increasing, decreasing, or persistent intensity of neurons that are fighting for our survival. This results in a particular feeling, facial and body display, and skin changes. Affects are rewarding or punishing, and affects make things urgent. And if you can see here, we see the 9 basic affects of enjoyment, joy, interest, excitement, shame, humiliation, distress or anguish, disgust, fear, terror, anger, rage, and dismal. This is something that every human being experiences the same. It is biology. When we talk about feelings, that's psychology. That is when we can speak to the affect and say, my affect, I feel rage. I'm angry because I feel, a sense of injustice. And then we go to injustice to the emotion of, I feel injustice because it's not fair that, and then you tie it to a memory, and that's biography. So that's emotion. So it's important to recognize that every time we are interacting with people, whether at the grocery store, at work, at home, we are quickly analyzing and assessing people's affect expression. And sometimes we're masking our affect expression because we don't want to share that we are sad, mad, disgusted. And so we sort of, have a little bit of armor to that. But we are constantly kind of assessing that. And the majority of our affects are inherently punishing. You guys have heard me say this before. And you can see there it says negative affects, positive affects. We only have 2 positive affects. And enjoyment, joy is there for our well-being, and it also is there for creating a safe environment, a trustworthy environment. So a smile on the face goes a long way and a real smile, not a fake smile, goes a long way when we are trying to foster a safe environment for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our colleagues, and for our students. Talking about the autonomic nervous system, this is also something universally all humans experience. We have the parasympathetic mode and the sympathetic mode. So this is our nervous system response to stimuli. And in this particular situation, we're talking about toxic stress. We've heard about the fight, flight, freeze. We've heard about social engagement, connection, safety, grounded, curiosity, compassion. In the present, we're social mammals. We are designed to co-regulate with one another. And so when we are in the freeze state, we are experiencing increase in arousal. We feel numbness, shame, depression, loss of energy, helplessness. We're shut down. When we're in the fight flight state, we feel panic, anxiety, fear, worry, concern, irritation, anger, frustration, rage. And I think that we can see this like when we are walking down the street and we see somebody's walking there, or we see a dog that's not on a leash, and we see the dog and the dog looks at us and the dog's tail is down and it makes sort of this body language, starts showing its teeth and starts growling. It's showing a level of maybe fear and rage. Okay, then we know that that dog might be violent, right? Whereas when we see a dog that has a wagging tail, that his ears are down, it's it's showing body language that it's socially engaged, it's grounded, then we feel maybe a sense of safety to be able to go and pet the dog. We don't see that dog as violent. And dogs are mammals. So, this is just an example of a dog. But when we can also see this in human beings, when they're in a place of looking like they might be violent, they're in a state of rage, which is a basic affect. They feel threatened to a certain extent. And in that moment, they are reactive. And so it's very important that you maintain your safety. You create some space in between you, you bring your voice down, you keep yourself calm. And if you feel like this person might react or be violent in any way, you call 911, you have somebody call 911, you you get yourself to a place of safety, and you try to calmly bring this person down if you can from their that increased arousal state. In the parasympathetic mode, we are, able to digest. We're in that rest and digest state. Our bladder and bowels are functioning normally. Our heart rate is down. Our respiratory rate is down, and our pupils are constricted. When we are in sympathetic mode, we're trying to get ourselves to a place of safety. So our pupils are dilated to allow more light in. It inhibits saliva. We have increased heart rate. We have increased respiratory rate. The digestive system becomes inhibited because we no longer need that. It's no longer a priority. Adrenaline is secreted, norepinephrine and epinephrine, so that we can get to a place of safety, or we can fight off the predator. Um, and then also we don't necessarily have bowel or bladder control at that state as well. So that brings me to a conversation around human suffering, right? So we're seeing more and more and more suffering that's happening, not just with our family members and our friends, but we're just kind of seeing it all around us. And what is suffering? So, suffering is what a person perceives as impending destruction, extending beyond the physical, connected to an experience that threatens a person's sense of wholeness. There are various forms of suffering. We've got physical pain or changes in health. We have psychological distress. We have emotional, social, isolation. And just recently, the Surgeon General came out saying that adults are experiencing, enormous rates of isolation, and that this is threatening our health. We've got financial. I think we're seeing more and more poverty every single day, and in particular housing needs. And it's incredibly sad to see. We also see trauma, abuse, more and more. It's very important that suffering is not life. However, it is a part of life. It is a part of the lived experience. And there are forms that we can avoid. We can avoid certain forms of suffering, and there are also unavoidable forms of suffering. So what is attunement and co-regulation? We can see it here in these images: a hug, a kind face, I'm here for you. This presence, empathy, compassion, authentic human connection. It's not sympathy. Sympathy, I remember, we were just discussing the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is I am imagining what you might be going through. And that imagining is that mirror neuron that I'm giving off to you of, man, that really sucks that you're going through that. I feel really bad that you're experiencing that. Is there something that I can do to help? Then we enter into compassion. Is there something that I can do to support you, not rescue you because you're capable? But this requires us to be present, right? And how many of us are multitasking? How many of us are on our phone? How many of us are juggling a million things at once? I am going to go out on a limb and say we are in a crisis of presence. That and not just that, but our new currency is our attention. And how quickly our attention is hijacked and with social media and emails and all these things. But the quality of presence is something that we can offer as a gift that helps to attune the nervous system. It allows us to enter into the space of empathy and into the space of compassion, and that authentic human connection where we can express kindness is important for our well-being, not just individually, but collectively. And it increases our health, actually, believe it or not. So how to cope with stress? We want to take some deep breaths. So I don't know if any of you have access to programs out there where you can actually, instead of doing yoga classes, you can do yoga classes, but there's also breathwork classes, which I'm eagerly trying to participate in and hopefully become certified in, because we can all know these things in theory, but without the breath, we have none of it. right? The breath is a very important part of our being able to cope with our stress and calmly move into responsiveness. Take 5 minutes, be active, take a walk. When I'm overwhelmed, when I'm out of my center, I need a 20-minute walk. And I got to tell you, after that 20-minute walk, I'm calm, I'm centered, and I'm in a more of a place of responsiveness. The quality in which I come forward is really more is the one in which I want to be in, right? I feel better overall. Connecting with other people, we are not meant to be in isolation. We are not meant to be on screens all day long. So looking at other people's faces is something that we need. We need to see affect expression. We need to see the smile on each other's faces. This connection with others is important for our health. Develop a healthy routine. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure that you are doing something that is joyful in movement. Lately, I've been doing the trampoline, and that's been really fun for me. I've been going on walks. That's been really great for me to just kind of clear my head. Engaging in some sort of body and movement play. You all know that I love to hula hoop and dance salsa. So, and then eating healthy, what we put into our body, the nutrients, but not just our food, our thoughts as well. And then seeking support from friends and family and trusted organizations as well. There is no shame in having a therapist or a coach, somebody that is in your corner, that is a trusted, compassionate other that you can get your thoughts out with and express what's in your head, put it out, and have them mirror back to you what you're going through, offer that empathy and compassion, and express back to you ways in which you're capable, and align themselves with you so that you can move through whatever hardship you might be experiencing. And you all know that Dr. Maya Angelou is my guru. I love her. She is like the woman of kindness. When I think of her story, and if you don't know her story, I really encourage you to learn about her story, because she went through an enormous amount of trauma and still was able to embody kindness, compassion, courage, and mirror that back to everyone to do right. And she says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And she also says, try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud.
Nice.
These are important phone contact numbers for all of us to have. Take a screenshot of it, take a picture with your phone. That's important, a suicide prevention hotline. We can't talk about violence and all of these things without bringing in the aspect of suicide. We've got counselor and advising here at SDGKU. That's not just for students. And we've got other emergency contact, National Domestic Violence Hotline, the Alcohol Drug Abuse Hotline, Sexual Assault Hotline, Veterans Crisis Hotline, and suicide prevention as well. And so again, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be, how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness at the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. So in summary, it is our responsibility to collectively create a safe working environment, practicing positive regard and respect for all persons employed at SDGKU. It is our responsibility to become familiar with our workplace violence plan, understand the importance of the violent incident log requirements, and remember that kindness with our thoughts, our words and actions, they really go a long way.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Gracias.
San Diego Global Knowledge University, Education Beyond Boundaries.